Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast, where we aim to inspire and motivate people to never give up on themselves or their dreams. We will chat with highly successful people from all walks of life and discuss what motivates and drives them to successfully attack life head on and never give up. Welcome to episode number 41 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is taking risks. Our quote of the day comes to us from Robert Kennedy. Only those who dare to fail greatly can never achieve greatly. Today marks day 10 of the 21-day No Quit Living Challenge. We welcome you to participate in this challenge where we invite you to think big and identify your one goal that you want to accomplish over these next 21 days. Please head over to our No Quit Living Facebook page for all the details and our daily videos. You can find us at facebook.com/noquitliving. We hope to see you there. I'm very excited to bring you today's episode. Not only is our guest today one of the most positive and outgoing individuals we have interviewed, her story is remarkable. When you talk about accomplishments, what she was able to attack and accomplish with her family is beyond impressive. Her positive vibe and upbeat love for life is very inspiring. It is my complete honor and privilege to introduce my friend, Hope Brookins. Hope, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Thank you.
First question I ask everybody is, are you ready to bring it today?
I am.
Awesome. So the number one objective of our podcast is to always motivate and inspire our listeners. One of the things we ask in our interviews is, do you have a personal story about perseverance or perhaps a challenging time that tested you and you kept on going and never quit?
Absolutely. When I was 17 years old, my family left a pretty traumatic domestic violence situation, and we needed a place to live. The only thing we could afford was a small house where me and my 3 younger siblings would all be sharing a bedroom. So we decided to build our own house. And when we say build our own house, that means like us as the construction crew. We could afford the supplies to build a house, but not the professionals. So in 9 months, my family and I built a 3,500 square foot house using YouTube tutorials. It was the hardest thing we've ever done because, like I said, we had no construction experience. The most we had ever done before that was tile a floor. So it was one of the biggest challenges of our lives, figuring out how to build a foundation, figuring out how to frame walls, figuring out how to just design a floor plan because we couldn't afford one of those either. So it was quite the challenge and something that we all overcame and persevered through together.
That is a remarkable story, and I just want to tell you that I can build a 5 to 8 year old Lego set like it's my job.
You know, what's so great about those Lego sets is that they come with such clear step-by-step instructions.
See, you didn't need to go there. Now you make it seem even easier than it really is. No, I have to tell you, I did some research and I knew you would share that story, but I have to say that is probably one of the coolest stories as far as perseverance and overcoming a challenging situation. And, you know, there was probably many different things you could have done as far as from a family's perspective. And a lot of them probably would, actually not a lot of them, I would say most of them probably would have been easier. But that's an unbelievable story as far as using videos and taking your supplies. And I got to ask, the follow-up question is, knowing that was such a daunting project, what was the hardest part about building a house?
The hardest part about building our house was when we first started building, and the first step of a house is building the foundation, then filling it with Donafill and then concrete. And that is the point when we realized we had no idea what we were doing. We did not have plumbing coming up to the house yet because we were our own plumbers. We did not have electricity coming up to the house yet because my mom had not found any electricians that we could hire. We legally did have to use licensed electricians. So for us, it was this. Literally, we have 1,500 concrete blocks, which those are those gray blocks that are about as big as a MacBook Pro laptop. And 1,500 of those, we were carrying 5-gallon buckets of water from the neighbor's pond because we had no plumbing. My mom was mixing that water with mortar in a wheelbarrow because we had no electricity for a concrete mixer to mix that up. And then we were, using a hand trowel and putting the mortar on those concrete blocks and placing them one at a time. And that process took us almost 2 months. That would take a professional crew 2 to 4 days to do. And that was the hardest part because it was just the beginning and we instantly realized how incredibly over our heads we were truly in.
All right, I got to ask then what was the absolute easiest part of building the house?
I think one of the easier parts once we got it down was framing the walls. And it was easy. Now, granted, the first wall we built had to be ripped apart about 7 times. But once you start framing, it goes so quickly and it's something that you can see immediate success with because you just built a wall and it's big and it's quick. You're just nailing together a few 2x4s. So that was the easiest just because it was motivational. As you were doing it, you were seeing improvement. Whereas with the foundation, you're adding one concrete block at a time and so many other things in a house, you're not even really seeing a difference. And sometimes it feels like you're even going backwards. And often with us, we were doing things wrong and having to redo them multiple times. So we were going backwards. So framing definitely wins the easiest award.
Well, I can do none of what you discussed, so I will take your word for the hardest and the easier of them. But I think it obviously must have had a profound impact on your life in the concept of actually doing something and completing something from beginning to end. And I was curious how, if it has that led to where you are today from your career? I assume there's got to be some overlap.
Yeah, I think that when my family built the house, the biggest takeaway for all of us was that we could do anything. And one of the questions that my mom would ask us as we were building is, what's the worst thing that could happen? Because oftentimes we were hesitant about doing something. A lot of these things are kind of scary for teenage kids. And if we answered that question, what's the worst that thing that could happen? If the answer was like death or serious injury that could lead to an ER visit, then it was like, no, reevaluate your plan. But if the answer was we drop this wall and it breaks and we have to build a new one, but no one's injured, then do it. So it created this lack of a fear of failure for me and my siblings and my mom too. And that led to being comfortable with taking big risk and not being afraid of failing. So for me, that meant starting a political career and then later transitioning to the consulting business that I run now, helping people with their personal brands. I wasn't afraid to take risk. So building a business is similar to building a house in that it's pretty risky and that there are lots of things that can go wrong and that you're guaranteed failures. I might not be ripping out walls multiple times, but I sure have ripped up my website multiple times, and I'm sure you can relate to that. So it's so similar. It's so similar, and just you have to be willing to take those risks.
No, I could not agree more, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of people are not willing to take the risks. And one thing I heard, and I've referenced a couple of times on our podcast, is the wealthiest place in the world, they say, are cemeteries, And the reason being is because inside those cemeteries are companies that were never started, businesses that were never taken to fruition, songs that were never written, movies that were never created. And I think it comes down to your point of being able to take risks. And one of the things you talked about, which your mother asked, is what's the worst thing that could happen? I think that's an important part of taking risk, is there's calculated risks versus just taking any and all risks. And I think obviously
right
to the level of success that you've had is you've taken those calculated risks. Now, one more question on the house. Is the house still standing today?
We get that question a lot, and it's so funny. And yes, it's been nearly a decade since we built the house. I was 17 at the time, and I turned 27 this October. And yeah, everything's standing. We have never had problems with anything. So it's, we're amazed by that sometimes too. Not that it's standing, but that there haven't been any problems with anything, particularly the plumbing. That was one of the things we were most concerned with because we did it ourselves and we had no clue what we were doing, but it turned out just fine. The toilets flush, the faucets work.
That's awesome. Now, maybe some home builders should take some advice that, the houses that have been built in the last 5-10 years that have all these issues and challenges. Maybe some of them should look at some YouTube videos.
Right. And one of the things that we did because of our ignorance that actually ended up really being a great thing was that we overbuilt things. So, for example, this is getting a little bit technical, but we used 2x6 boards for the walls instead of 2x4s, which made them thicker because that's more energy efficient. Well, one of the things we didn't know is that when you use those thicker boards, you can have a bigger gap between them because they can support more. Well, we didn't make that bigger gap between them. We still just did the standard 16 inches between each stud. So that means that our walls are actually overbuilt. They're extra strong. And that's just one little example. There's so many things like that just because of our complete ignorance, we overbuilt things. The roof on the shop we built is made to hold like a crazy amount of snow because the YouTube video that we watched was made for people who were living in Wisconsin or Alaska. There's so many little things like that where, it's actually extra strong compared to a normal a normal house that a contractor would make that is perhaps done, more cost efficiently.
That is awesome in so many different ways. And I think it's very motivating. And I really appreciate you sharing that and your candor. So one of the things we do in every episode is we utilize a daily quote. And I was curious if you have a favorite quote.
There's one, and now I wish I could say this is attributed to a person, and it might be, but honestly, it's from a fortune cookie that I got at a Chinese restaurant around the time we were building the house. And it was, success will not attack you, you must attack it. And I think that me and my whole family approach life that way, in that you can't just sit around waiting for something to happen. You can't sit around waiting for your life to be fixed. You have to go after what you want, and you have to make it happen. So the wise words, the quote is, success will not attack you, you must attack it. So it just goes back to this idea of being super intentional.
I like that, super intentional. And one of the things we talk about a lot on our podcast is actually taking action. And I could not tell you that I'm going to look for it and see if it is an actual quote out there. But I do love that quote, and I appreciate you sharing that.
Yes, I still think I have the fortune somewhere taped to a vision board.
If you could ever find a picture of that, I would pay for that. That is awesome.
I know I have one somewhere, but I'm one of those people who takes way too many pictures.
Well, I will challenge you at some point. If you ever do come across it, please send it our way.
Yes, I'm going to. Now it's a challenge.
See, I'm going to challenge you. So to follow up for that is, as we all know, life is incredibly challenging. And obviously you guys and your family overcame a challenge. And I think we get brought up every day with different obstacles, big, small. But I was curious, what motivates you and inspires you to keep going every single day?
I don't know if there's a specific thing that I can point my finger to. I think for me, it's building something bigger than myself. It's this idea of whether I'm looking at a family empire or whether I'm looking at my own empire that inspires other people. It all comes down to making an impact. And to do that, you have to build something that's really, really big.
No, I like that. And aim bigger and just keep going for it.
Mm-hmm. There's this concept called strategic intent that I'm obsessed with. And it's just this idea of doing things and making plans that you don't yet have the resources to accomplish. And that's totally how I live my life by.
Strategic intent. I like that. Here's a challenging question for you. What is the one thing that you would attempt if you knew no matter what you couldn't fail?
There's not anything that I want that I haven't tried to attempt. I'll give an example of one of the things that I'm trying right now that is taking a lot of guts and courage, and that's a TV show. Right now, I'm talking to multiple production companies and pursuing an unscripted, yes, that means reality TV show. And it's something that in the past I was more afraid of, but just going through this experience with my family of building the house and then the experience of my family earlier this year of going absolutely viral, I'm fearless. So that's one of the bigger things that's still probably I'd put on the scary list for me that I'm attempting anyhow.
That is awesome. And I think, not to say that everything happens for reasons, but I think directly and indirectly, dealing with what you guys had to overcome in your house, it's clearly had such a positive impact in your life and your willingness to try different things, but to keep going hard and to have big vision. And I think that's a big thing. And it comes back to something we spoke about a couple minutes ago, is at the end of the day, in the beginning of the day, you still need to take action.
Right. And when you build a house, you feel like you can do anything. You're not afraid to take on other challenges, because that's so ridiculous in and of itself that it makes all ridiculous things seem sane.
You know, not to talk about it in that way, but it is very ridiculous when you think about it. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful, but
I agree.
I was just thinking back right now, if I went home tonight to my 3 children who are much younger than you and your siblings were, but if I said to them, hey, we're going to build a house, their immediate response is going to be, okay, cool, Dad, I'll get the Legos out. And my immediate response is, no, not a Lego house. I'm talking a real house. And as ridiculous as it sounds, I don't even know where I would begin. And the fact that somewhere along the way you guys decided to do this was inspiring enough. But the fact that you said, hey, we'll YouTube it, at the end of the day, it's going to, again, touching back on something we've said 2 or 3 times, is you had to take action. And that's just remarkable that you took this, let's call it ridiculous idea, whether it was your mom's or you and your siblings, but somebody said, let's build our own house. And then not only did somebody say that, but you all took action and then went ahead and did it. I mean, that to me, it's just so ridiculous in many ways. And it makes me feel almost like some of the accomplishments I've had in life don't even come to the same stratosphere of what you've accomplished.
No, I think that ultimately it goes back to that concept of strategic intent and this concept of dreaming big. And as long as you're taking the risk in your own life and doing those big things that are what you want to do, which for most people are not building a house. I don't know if it would ever be building a house for me again, but it's just as long as you're doing those things and taking those risks, then you're doing the right thing with your life, then you're living right. And now with the internet, with YouTube, with Google, there is no excuse to not take action because you literally have free instructions to do anything at your fingertips.
You know, you've actually motivated me now to share a story with you. So here we go. And our listeners have never heard this either. So back in January of this year, I got a flat tire on the side of the road. And I swear to God, I YouTubed how to change it for my specific make and model, and I did it. It only took me it only took me about an hour and a half, but I got it done, and I was able to do it. Now, in no way, shape, or form am I saying that's even remotely close to building a house, but I just wanted to say that I actually have used the YouTube video, and I do have pictures to prove it.
No, I love that, and I love how attainable YouTube makes things feel, because everyone has done a makeup tutorial or changed their oil or tire or baked a cake by watching a YouTube video to learn how to do it. So then when people hear my family's story, so often it just feels like, well, if I can do my makeup using a YouTube tutorial, then I just have to watch the right YouTube tutorials and I could build a house too. And it's like, yes, but there's this taking action step that's involved too. And I really just love the level of attainability and that people are able to relate to our story and feel like they can do anything, because who can't use a YouTube tutorial? So I love that. I love to hear that about your tire, and I can't wait to hear what else you do using YouTube.
I wish I had a better story. Again, now that I've heard you say it, it feels so small and useless based on building a house.
No, because that's the first step. You use YouTube for something that's totally necessary, like changing a tire. And what are you going to use it for next? Like, what is that next big thing that you're going to use a tutorial or a handful of tutorials to build?
I agree with that, but I will tell you that this is a fact. There will be no shot that I will ever build my own house, because My fear is I would either destroy myself and or the house probably within the first day or two.
Well, we always say your big thing may not be building a house, but just figure out what your big thing is and build it. And that's metaphorical. It does not mean with tools. Not everyone should be using construction tools.
So here's a question for you a little bit outside the norm is if you could have dinner with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be and why?
Ooh, this is a good one. Dead or alive? Oh, I should think about this more. I'm not one of those people who's thought about this a bunch. Oprah, probably. Because I think that my whole family, it's not about, oh, she's famous, I want to meet her and have a picture with her. It's about she had a really challenging background too, and she used it to leverage herself forward. And she built an empire around it. She built an empire around herself in a way that most normal people haven't. And she then furthered that and started changing the world with schools, with charities, with so many things. So I'd say it would definitely have to be her.
That would be an interesting meeting between the two of you. I don't know who would get more accomplished out of that dinner.
Yeah, I think it would be fun. I'd have her running for office and she'd have me starting a TV show or something by the end of it.
Why not a TV show about running for office?
I've heard producers try to stay away from politicians.
Yes, when you mix politics with TV, that's a recipe for disaster in some way.
Yes.
So I wanted to ask you if you have anything exciting that you'd like to share with our listeners.
Yeah, I have some awesome new e-courses that are coming out. They'll be out in the fall of 2017. I don't have any specific dates yet, but they're all about branding yourself and figuring out how to monetize yourself.
And what is the best way for our listeners to connect or follow you?
Yeah, they can go to my website at hopebrookins.com. They can follow me on virtually every social media except for Snapchat. And my username everywhere is at hopebrookins.
At Hope Brookins. We will put that in the show notes. And then the last question for you, before we let you go, do you have any parting words for our listeners?
It's better to ask for forgiveness than permission. That's my other, yes, that's my other favorite quote.
Well, you cheated a little bit. You were only allowed to have one favorite quote, but because you can build a house from a YouTube video, you can have two quotes.
Perfect.
Well, listen, Hope, I cannot thank you enough for sharing your story. I knew a little bit about it going into it, but I truly appreciate your candor, and I welcome our audience and our listeners to connect with you via your social media outlets. But again, I wanted to thank you for your time.
Thank you.
To sum up today's episode and our theme of the day, taking risks, I don't think we can come up with a better example than Hope and her family. After dealing with a difficult and very stressful family situation, Hope and her family took action. We briefly joked during the episode, but I want to make sure that our listeners truly understand and grasp the severity of what Hope and her family were able to accomplish. They built a 3,500 square foot house from scratch by watching YouTube videos. Wow. Talk about determination, commitment, and perseverance. The best part about the interview was when Hope discussed strategic intent, dreaming big, and taking action. So my challenge to our listeners today is, what is holding you back? What is that one thing you want to do? What is that one calculated risk that you have pondered over and over again? And why haven't you attempted it? Today's call to action is very simple. Do one thing today that will move you closer to accomplishing that one thing that you have yet to attempt. Do one thing today, and then do another thing tomorrow, and the day after as well. Take action, and go for your greatness. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.